A young girl, barely a child, met a brutal end. Her body was left exposed, stripped of both clothing and identity. She remained a total stranger. No one came forward to identify the remains. 4 decades had passed before the file reached us. The trail had grown impossibly cold. The mission was to give her a name for the family still waiting. Yet, the lack of physical evidence was agonizing. Investigators analyzed the skeletal remains, but the bones refused to yield a viable genetic profile. A devastating setback. The fear lingered that the testing process might have inadvertently consumed the last of the evidence. The investigation was a relentless series of dead ends. A chemical-soaked autopsy slide from 40 years ago was an unexpected find, though our options were rapidly disappearing. The toll on my husband was visible. He had become a different man. On November 1st, 1980, Walker County deputies responded to a grim discovery along Interstate 45 near mile marker 123. Meet Thomas Bean. As a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Department, he leads the investigation into the Walker County Jane Doe homicide. Responders found a young woman's lifeless body, stripped bare and left in the elements. Without identification and lacking modern forensic tools, the 1980 investigators faced a daunting challenge. They gathered what they could: a ligature cinched around her throat and a pair of discarded shoes. A delicate gold chain with a small pendant remained around the victim's neck. Early assessments suggested the victim had been subjected to a violent sexual assault around the time of death. The search began for any missing persons reported in the surrounding region. Investigators canvassed the community, hoping someone would recognize the face of the girl from the roadside. Several witnesses emerged, providing various leads about a girl matching her description. One potential sighting placed her at an establishment known as the Hitchin Post. Interviewees at a nearby diner were shown post-mortem photos, generating a surge of conflicting details. The reliability of eyewitness testimony, however, is notoriously fragile. Memories often diverge, with many convinced they spoke to her when they likely hadn't. Some reports suggested she was traveling from South Texas, destined for a nearby correctional facility to meet an inmate. These claims, however, remained entirely unverified. Checks at the local prison units yielded no record of her arrival or presence. No connection to any inmate was ever established, leaving the investigators at a standstill. Days later, a discarded bag was discovered within the city limits of Huntsville. The bag contained personal items and documents pointing toward a potential link in Colorado. When questioned, the individuals named in the bag denied ever being in Walker County. This lead eventually withered into another dead end. Lacking a name, the county interred her in an unmarked plot as an unknown Caucasian female. The file went cold, though the mystery continued to haunt those within the department. The story of the girl by the highway became legendary among the ranks of the sheriff's office. Public interest in the case never wavered. A dedicated social media page went viral, capturing national attention as millions sought to uncover her identity. Consider this: a seemingly middle-class teenager was found discarded like refuse on an interstate shoulder, stripped of everything. Her features were obscured by severe trauma and bruising. She remained a ghost to the investigators. No one claimed her, fueling rumors of a station wagon transporting her toward the prison walls. Rumors of a Texas runaway led to multiple discussions with Carl. Carl acted as a conduit for tips from the public, passing information to the primary investigators. With nothing confirmed, the body was finally exhumed in 1999. Forensic teams extracted bone fragments, hoping to isolate a viable genetic signature. Because she wasn't in the national database, the search hit a brick wall. The mission was clear: identify the girl and return her to her kin for burial. This particular mystery has long haunted the public imagination. The failure to solve it wasn't for a lack of trying. A child was stolen by a monster. The world demanded her name. Her identity remained a void. David Middleman, CEO of Othram, stepped in. Reviving a decades-old cold case is a mountain of technical hurdles. If a biological trace remains, there is a chance to restore a stolen name. Othram exists for this reason: to find answers where hope has expired. Kristen Middleman serves as the Chief Development Officer at Othram. They utilize advanced genomic sequencing to map out complex DNA profiles. They reverse engineer identities before a name is ever known, upending traditional forensics. They are focused on what authorities call a silent mass disaster. Countless unidentified remains sit in storage, the forgotten victims of violence. Investigating a murder is impossible when the victim is a total stranger. The Walker County mystery sat just 1 hour north of their base. The sheer difficulty of the case made it a perfect candidate for their tech. When a case becomes a legendary riddle, the drive to solve it intensifies. If a local tragedy remains unsolved, the team feels compelled to intervene. David immersed himself in the case files, losing sleep for 3 months. As parents, the sheer brutality of a teenager's death felt like a personal wound. The investigation left her husband fundamentally changed. With new computational power available, ignoring these cases felt like a moral failure. They requested a chance to examine whatever physical evidence had survived. 40 years had passed since the crime, a lifetime in the world of evidence. A cold call from Othram introduced a technology he had never heard of. After a briefing, the FBI and Texas Rangers helped secure the necessary funds. Wesley Doolittle, now sheriff, previously hunted for the truth with the Texas Rangers. He was the investigator assigned to breathe life into the county's cold files. His early talks with David focused on the faceless victims in the system. They discussed how armed services could finally give these ghosts their names back. They resolved to see if technology could finally break the girl's silence. The lab received the skeletal remains to begin the delicate extraction process. The initial results were crushing. The bones yielded no usable genetic material. Time can be a thief, stripping even the bones of their biological secrets. To find zero DNA was a rare and devastating blow to the experts. The failure hit the entire investigative team with a heavy weight. Hearing the evidence was too degraded was painful, but the search continued. They coordinated with the Harris County medical examiner to find a new lead. They scoured the archives for any overlooked fragment that might still hold answers. Locating old evidence proved difficult in a maze of lost records. The lax standards of past evidence rooms created a frustrating logistical nightmare. Every time they thought they found a clue, the trail went cold. The jewelry she was wearing had simply vanished from the evidence locker. The victim's clothing had simply vanished. Concern grew as skeletal analysis failed, leaving investigators with a rapidly cooling trail. Tom discovered a private facility holding overlooked evidence from an old post-mortem examination. The lab possessed microscopic tissue samples, preserved on glass slides during the initial autopsy. Finally, a breakthrough. They faced the worst possible evidence: microscopic residue, chemically altered on glass, but still viable. Though success was never guaranteed, the team viewed this long shot as a necessary gamble. The fragile glass slides were immediately dispatched to the specialized laboratory. Formaldehyde preservation is a double-edged sword, securing tissue while simultaneously shattering the DNA. A permanent chemical adhesive. The process binds the biological material before completely dehydrating the entire specimen. Imagine a butterfly pinned in a case perfectly intact, visually, yet structurally compromised. One touch turns it to dust, making the extraction of readable genetic sequences nearly impossible. Therefore, the challenge lay in rehydrating these shards, capturing them, and meticulously reconstructing a recognizable identity. Pure struggle. Genomic specialists began the case by scrutinizing the unique properties of the degraded samples. Formaldehyde had effectively shackled the genetic material together. These molecular crosslinks fused the DNA to proteins, creating an inseparable tangle. Massive proteins were permanently welded to the strands, resisting all standard separation. There was a fear that forced extraction would destroy the sample entirely. The resulting genetic data would be unintelligible gibberish. A low-fidelity profile is useless. Missing markers render genealogical matches impossible. Accuracy was paramount. Only a high-resolution sequence could illuminate the necessary family ties. In forensic science, testing equals total consumption. There were no second chances. Proceed without certainty, and the evidence would vanish forever. Sometimes, the best move is to wait for technology to advance. Preservation outweighed desperation, leading the team to a difficult tactical pause. They halted work, a bitter pill to swallow when explaining delays to law enforcement. The atmosphere was somber, but David remained resolute, refusing to give up. The extraction process carried a high risk of total annihilation. David realized an extensive phase of theoretical research was now required. He would have to pioneer an entirely new validation protocol from scratch. Time became irrelevant. The only mission was restoring identity to a missing person. The investigators faced a dual crisis: a laboratory hurdle and a computational wall. They had to decipher the code and filter meaningful data from digital noise. The core question remained: which genetic markers were truth and which were mere artifacts? Months were spent simulating the crisis through rigorous, hypothetical mock trials. Researchers experimented with damaged samples, searching for a way to sever those chemical bonds. Over 1 year of research and silence passed. Finally, they perfected a methodology that yielded a viable result. Armed with new confidence, they reached out to Detective Bean with news. They re-engaged with the lead investigator. David briefed the team on his breakthrough but issued a chilling warning. Failure meant permanent loss. The potential for catastrophe was made clear. The evidence was abysmal, offering zero guarantees of success. Every possible lead had been exhausted. This was their final, desperate gamble. The sample transitioned from the feasibility room to the lab's genomic wing. Technicians prepared the sequence, hoping the hardware could decode the past. Forensic-grade sequencing was used to read the genetic code left decades ago. The initial readout appeared chaotic, a digital tangle of biological static. Entire sections of the genome had vanished, yet a foundation remained. It was a profound relief to find usable data within the noise. The forensic team convened to strategize their next analytical move. They worked to build a profile capable of mapping true bloodlines. A 40-year-old autopsy slide had to yield a profile matching modern standards. Navigating that technical gap proved to be an immense challenge. Investigators did their best to salvage the degraded genetic material. Subtle adjustments were made to the lab protocol to improve extraction. With the profile complete, the hunt for living relatives began in earnest. This robust digital blueprint was uploaded to authorized genealogical databases. Software quickly isolated a common ancestor shared by the distant matches. The algorithm began flagging the most likely candidates for the identity. The team scrutinized every hypothesis to determine the most logical path. Soon, they informed Tom that the girl's origins were finally surfacing. She was tied to a specific area, likely one of several sisters. David reached out to Detective Tom Bean with the sudden development. Bean had feared the gamble might have permanently destroyed the evidence, but David was electric. He finally had names to offer the investigation. The victim's lineage traced to Minnesota, not Texas as originally suspected. The long-held theory regarding her local origins was effectively dismantled. It fell to the investigators to identify the missing branch of that family. An exhaustive search of every available public record commenced immediately. An obituary matched David's lead, revealing a map of the family. Every relative listed in that document was accounted for, except for one. At that moment, the investigation reached a chilling realization. There was little doubt that the missing person was their Jane Doe. With only one name left in the shadows, the detective began calling. On the fourth attempt, a woman answered. Bean pleaded for her patience. He introduced himself as an investigator, revisiting a 1980 cold case. Her response was haunting. "You're calling about my sister." In that instant, the 40-year silence was finally broken. To confirm the link, family members provided DNA to their local authorities. Those samples were forwarded for testing to finalize the genetic match. After decades of clinical analysis and searching, the truth emerged. Walker County Jane Doe was officially identified as Sheranne Jarvis. The weight of such a discovery is almost impossible to articulate. A visceral chill remained as the mystery finally dissolved. After 40 years of anonymity, the woman regained her identity. She was a 14-year-old girl once lost to truancy and tragedy. During that era, Minnesota law strictly criminalized truancy among minors. State authorities placed Sherry into a group home, but she fled before custody could be finalized. By late 1980, she reached Texas, where she met a brutal end on Halloween night. Negotiating with the family for the release of this sensitive information spanned several months. Forensic specialists required additional DNA samples from her brother to establish a definitive physical identity. The press conference officially identifying Sheranne Jarvis was meticulously scheduled. The announcement fell precisely on the 41st anniversary of her discovery. Restoring her name provided a rare moment of dignity in a decades-long cold case. Law enforcement stood in solemn solidarity with the Jarvis family as the sheriff broke the silence. The atmosphere that afternoon was heavy with the weight of 40 years of grief. This breakthrough resonated globally, breathing life into a mystery once considered entirely hopeless. Seeing her true name appear on a mobile screen left investigators profoundly stunned. Reclaiming the name Sheranne Jarvis over the Walker County Jane Doe alias was a monumental victory. This discovery offered the family peace while simultaneously generating a wave of fresh investigative leads. Detectives conducted extensive, emotional interviews with Sherry's surviving sisters and brother. The siblings confirmed Sherry had sent a final letter promising her mother she would return. That correspondence was traced to Colorado, matching evidence found in a property bag in 1980. 4 decades later, the investigation circled back to the geographical clues identified at the start. Authorities are now aggressively pursuing these recovered leads to reconstruct her final days. The hunt for her killer continues as investigators determine if other victims remain hidden. This unsolved murder remains an open wound, preserved in a digital space that refuses to fade. The case file stays active, inviting the public to contribute any lingering fragments of truth. Identifying the victim is the crucial first step toward unmasking a calculated killer. Forensic science has entered an era of nearly limitless potential for solving historical crimes. Advanced genetic analysis suggests that leaving a crime unsolved is now a conscious choice. The sophisticated DNA extraction methods utilized in this case remain uniquely specialized. In the wake of such profound trauma, the traditional concept of closure feels inadequate. Investigators avoid the word closure, acknowledging that some wounds never truly heal. The mission is not to provide comfort, but to deliver the unvarnished, objective truth. Providing the facts allows a grieving family to finally move toward an uncertain next chapter. A local memorial features a tree of angels for those lost to senseless violence. Each year, a specific ornament is placed on the branches in memory of Sherry. This ritual will continue as a solemn promise until the family can perform it themselves. Sheranne Jarvis is remembered as a vibrant girl whose life was cut tragically short. A predator ended her future with extreme brutality, leaving an image etched in the public mind. There is finally genuine hope that the family will receive a long-awaited phone call. The ultimate goal is the news that Sherry's killer has finally faced their day of judgment. For over 4 decades, Sherry Jarvis was a ghost, a Jane Doe discarded on a cold Texas highway. But beneath the clinical label of an unidentified decedent was a 14-year-old girl who laughed, who struggled, and who once wrote a letter promising her mother she would return. Sherry's story is a heartbreaking testament to the silent mass disaster hiding in our society, the thousands of souls lost in archives, stripped of their voices and their history. It teaches us a profound moral lesson. No human life is disposable. When we allow a person to remain nameless, we allow a piece of our collective humanity to wither away. While advanced DNA technology finally broke the 40-year silence, the true miracle was the relentless refusal of investigators to let her memory fade. Her journey from anonymity back to identity serves as a powerful call to action. We must protect our vulnerable youth, bridge the gaps in our justice system, and never stop searching for the truth, no matter how cold the trail. A name is more than just a label. It is a person's dignity, their heritage, and their right to be remembered. Let us honor Sherry by ensuring that the forgotten are found, the silent are heard, and every Jane Doe is finally given the path back home.